Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Mystery Read Reads. Before we begin, we're going to go over my disclaimer. This beta read in concrete is at the author's request. This video is for learning purposes. Before we go into today's read and crit, I want to pause to visit something that came up in my last video. While reading Chapter 3 of Infinite Shades, I kept wondering if the word sir should be capitalized. I think I thought that because sir seems formal to me, like we're being respectful, particularly in the military setting. That was extra confusing, and we were kind of working in a military setting in Infinite Shades, so I was a little confused. So the rules of English can be tricky at times, especially with the situations we writers find ourselves in. I mean, we plan a story one way and sometimes we end up somewhere else that was not on our radar. I can tell you my search engine history is wild. And the odd things that I know from having to research them because of where my story was taking me is also wild. Anyway, Crystal Committee, that's the author, reached out to let me know that they had researched and that sir is actually lowercase when addressing military. It's lowercase anyway. There are two exceptions to when it is capitalized. It's capitalized when addressing someone in a title, for example, Sir Paul McCartney, Sir Sean Connery, or Sir Elton John. It would be formal and therefore capitalized. Or if we're opening a letter, Dear Sir, the same with Dear Madam. I'm thankful she cleared this up, and I thought, well, that's the point of this channel and this whole entire method is to have a discussion that we can share with more than one author at a time by practice. So the things we come across, we can revisit them, share what we've learned, and we have it documented for everyone to watch. So I'm going to share what we learn as we go, and we want to cite our sources, which when she sent me the information, she did cite hers was the Chicago Manual of Style, abbreviated CMOS, and she had done a Google search the same. And so I also have searched to show you guys when is sir capitalized. And we look for references that are professional and we can feel good about. I think anything called homework study probably is pretty reputable because we're looking at people who are probably trying to look up the same kind of questions and need references. Here is the Chicago Manual of Style, reiterating the same thing. Sir and madam should be capitalized as proper nouns, and the expression is followed by a comma or colon, a blank line in the body of your message. So write out sir or madam rather than using slash. So it's talking about situations when you would use it and how you would use it. Do you use a capital letter after Dear Sir? The answer is yes, because in this case you're formally addressing, it's a salutation. So there's different situations we're going to find ourselves in, and as we learn things, we're going to share them here. Here we go again, Dear Sir, and this one is also from Homework Study again, and I'm trying to find where it tells you what type of grammar is sir. I'm looking for where it says, because we're not looking specifically for addressing in a letter, which I've written enough letters to know that already. But this situation was where he would be saying like yes sir, and to this other person, and it came up again because that's how you speak when you're being super respectful and formal, and so that's where the question came from. So I'm trying to look, but I had read through some of this, like, do you capitalize sir? A lot of it keeps wanting to say when you're addressing a letter, and that one I knew already. You are right to refer lowercase. Here's Chicago Manual of Style again. Terms like sir and madam are almost never used literally as titles these days. We'll click this one. Let's see. Hi, I see that Chicago Manual of Style discusses kinship names and when to capitalize versus when to lowercase. I'm wondering about a term like sir or ma'am used in direct address. Well, that's again addressing a letter, and we knew that one. Let's see. So unless you're transcribing a conversation with Sir Paul McCartney or Dame Judi Dench, Right. Yes, sir. Here it is. Oops. Oh my goodness. Hang on. Yes, sir. And yes, ma'am. Compare greetings, doctor. In that case, doctor is a proper noun standing in for a person's name in the form of a surname. So I guess terms like sir and ma'am are almost never used literally as titles. Instead, they're more often common nouns or pronouns, hello stranger or hey you. I even saw one thing when I was looking at this. I even saw one thing that said you could have yes sir and even omit the comma. Now, it is so ingrained in me that when you're addressed, this is the person, and that there's always like a comma before that. So I don't know if I would adopt that practice, but I did see somewhere that it said you could do that. It was almost like either or. I personally would be using this method as far as the comma is concerned, which commas are another thing we could dive into because I struggle with them still. That's probably my biggest vice is the comma. But um, anyway, this was really helpful, and I'm really glad she looked that up and shared it with me. And I thought, oh, this is a great opportunity to share with everyone else. So we've shed a little light on the capitalization or lower or not of the word sir. Now we'll see if my brain can adopt it when I'm doing a read because it is new, and so it takes practice to adopt a new rule. So on that note, we're going to minimize here, and oh my gosh, my little screen just, whoop, that's not the one I want. It's doing its own thing. Isn't that just fun? Oh my goodness, what is it doing? All right, we are doing an original fiction today, and it is a beta read in Concrete. So we're just going to go ahead and minimize those. I don't know what happened there. And we're going to dive in. And today we are reading for someone new. We are reading for Rose Colored Mirror. And I don't know the actual title of the piece. I don't think I have the title as it's a work in progress. But we will go, we'll just use the chapter here, the title in the chapter. So, and we're going to dive in. I don't have any preface to this piece. I probably could if I go back and dig through my conversation with Crystal Committee. But I've got Rose Colored Mirror's private message asking me to do this crit. So what we're going to do is go ahead and just get started, and we'll see what comes up. Chapter 1, The Two Old Ladies. Liddy felt very old. When she looked at her lunch, she remembered eating it hundreds of times before. She had seen every type of cloud that had a scientific name, though what those names were she didn't know, and Christmas had started to become tedious instead of magical. Yet Liddy was considered childish for her age, and that troubled her. If she still had a lot of growing up to do, and how boring did life have to get before she was considered mature? Then. Did I read it and? I think I read it as and. Let me just reread that sentence. If she still had a lot of growing up to do, then how boring did life have to get before she was considered mature? In the past few years, all of her peers had caved in to boringness. They no longer talked about what might be buried under the Sphinx in Egypt, or how someday they hoped to be world-famous detectives. Instead, they talked at her about intermittent fasting, birthing techniques, and 401ks. She kept meaning to look up what a 401k was, but she had a feeling it didn't apply to her. Like taxes. But sitting in the car as her mom drove her up to a dirty white house with a tall sloping roof, Liddy had the horrifying realization that she might need to learn about those things sooner rather than later. After all, she was now, almost, officially employed. Whoa. Okay. Whoa, hang on. How old is this person? So Liddy feels old. She looks at her lunch. She's eaten it hundreds of times. She's seen every type of cloud that had a scientific name. And Christmas has started to become tedious instead of magical. Okay. I've got so many thoughts right now. Yet Liddy was considered childish for her age, and that troubled her. If she still had a lot of growing up to do, and how boring, then why do I keep saying and? Then how boring did life have to get before she was considered mature? Oh, what an interesting I have so many thoughts. I have thoughts about almost each line. Okay. I'm trying to figure out, do I want to give my thoughts or okay. I'm gonna weed through my thoughts. It read really well up to the point that I've stopped. But I'm stopping because I'm thinking all these different thoughts. And I think I'm just gonna let them ramble and see what happens. More for the author's benefit than anything. So Liddy felt very old. So immediately my reader brain goes, okay, so Liddy feels old. Maybe Liddy is middle aged. Maybe Liddy is old. When she looked at her lunch, she remembered eating it hundreds of times before. That kind of makes me think Alzheimer's for a second. She had seen every type of cloud that had a scientific name, though what those names were, she didn't know. Now that's interesting. So I'm still thinking it could be Alzheimer's, as in Liddy doesn't remember the names, but she doesn't seem to think that she should know them. She's just saying she doesn't know them. And then I also kind of think a little bit maybe potentially a disability of some sort, possibly. I'm not sure. And then I've got more thoughts. Okay, and then I'm kind of also wondering, on a side note, she'd seen every type of cloud that has scientific name. There's a little bit of a knee jerk reaction there where she's looked at her lunch, but then next thing you know, she's thinking about the clouds. Again, that supports an Alzheimer's thought, okay? Because we've jumped from one subject to the other, like they're not related. So her thoughts are jumping around. And then Christmas has started to become tedious instead of magical. This is an interesting section right here for a number of reasons. One, again, personally, and I'm not saying this character has Alzheimer's. These are all reader thoughts that are just passing through my brain as I read these. These are my first. My brain is turning over the possibilities right now. We're gonna get more, but I want to give over these initial possibilities that are going through my head. When it says Christmas has started to become tedious instead of magical, there's a couple times in life where that feeling occurs, and I think if someone did have Alzheimer's, that would be one of them. And I think I say that because my mother does have Alzheimer's, and in the years before she was trying to hide it, she started to kind of treat it like a chore, and that was not really like her. But then again, on another light, from another perspective, there's as we age, kind of between I'd say our 30s, maybe, and maybe even our 20s a little bit, we can feel that way, especially after, the secret is out. If you don't if you don't have a plan for accepting the secret is out, like in my family, you're brought into the know, you're brought into the club. Now you know. So now you're part of the magic. If you don't have something like that to look forward to, it can become this tedious thing. You get your 9 to 5 groove, you get a job, it's like another thing just sucking the money out of your paycheck. There's so many ways to view that, and there's so many ages that could feel that. So this is very interesting. Yet Liddy was considered childish for her age, and that troubled her. Now, a person with a disability could be considered childish for their age, depending on what that is that they're facing, and what their cognitive ability is. They may be aware of that impression on them, and that would be troubling to them. And I do have some experience with people with disabilities. I'm a guardian, so another thing is Liddy could have just lived a sheltered life. But being considered childish tells me that she can't be super old, because if you're for real old, then you're not usually considered childish unless you have something like Alzheimer's. And I think opening with Liddy felt old, and the title being The Two Old Ladies kind of initially makes me think that she might be old. But some of this kind of makes me wonder if she's not actually like in her early 20s or 30s or and facing some mix of something here. There's something going on clearly. If she still has a lot of growing up to do, then how boring did life have to get before she was considered mature? That almost sounds like someone in their early, like between 18 and 21 kind of thing. Because, when they're 18, they think they're grown, but they still have so much to learn. Um, Life experience, I guess, to be had. In the past few years, all of her peers had caved into boringness. Um, the word boringness bothers me a little bit. I'm wondering if there's another way to put it, or if you just happen to really like it, I guess it's okay. Um, I'm not really sure about that particular word. I get its meaning, but I'm not really sure if I would use that word. Maybe. It depends on my character. So, and their mindset. Sometimes we use words that fit the character too. In the past few years, all of her peers had caved in to boringness. Interesting. So it almost sounds like, okay, this could be someone in their early 20s as well, because, one by one, your friends become responsible adults, and maybe Liddy wasn't ready to do that yet. So that's an option too. They no longer talked about what might be buried under the Sphinx in Egypt, or how someday they hope to be world famous detectives. Yes, when we're young, we have all these ideas and fantasies, and it's interesting that for a really long time we continue to say when I grow up, and then we realize one day we've grown up and we still haven't done what we thought we would be doing. So I really like this. Instead, they talked at her about intermittent fasting, birthing techniques. Ooh, I'm hearing early 20s. Early to mid 20s, maybe. Yeah. Maybe mid to late. I don't know. It depends. Some of them hurry and want to have children right away, and others wait till they're kind of in their 26 to 31 window. Let's see. Instead, they talked at her. And I like this because use of at her in this situation makes it clear she's not really part of the conversation. They're talking to her, not to her. I guess if they're talking to her, she'd be part of the conversation. Talking at her gives me the clear impression that she's on the receiving end of information she didn't really want. If that was your intention, you scored. Okay, and then I love this with the 401ks. Okay, I'm starting to get a early to mid 20s vibe here. So let's keep going. She kept meaning to look up what a 401k was, but she had a feeling it didn't apply to her. Now, so the fact that she doesn't know what a 401k is, I'm getting a sheltered life vibe here. And it continues to build as we move on, like taxes. But sitting in the car as her mom drove her up to a dirty white house with a tall sloping roof, Lydia had a horrifying realization that she might need to learn about those things sooner rather than later. After all, she was now almost officially employed. So much here. So sitting in the car as her mom drives her up. Okay, so her mom is driving her. Now, that would contribute to possibly being sheltered and learning to venture out into the world, even though we might be somewhere in our, definitely an adult, just not be kind of grown to one. But then again, if Liddy does have a disability, she wouldn't be driving, but she might have the cognitive ability to help someone. So this is still a possibility. And then, but it definitely gets the mind working. See all the different thoughts from these first couple paragraphs that I've had, all these possibilities that are open. Okay, so I'm driven right into this sucker. This is amazing. Okay, had the horrifying realization she might need to learn about these things sooner rather than later. After all, she was now almost officially employed. So it almost sounds like this is her first job. So many thoughts, so many possibilities. Let's keep going and find out what we learn. Liddy walked up the crumbling cement steps and creaked open a metal screen door. I'm going to pause right there. So we're describing the sound that follows the door, but before the door's been opened. And I would still use creaked. Perhaps Liddy walked up the crumbling cement steps, opening a creaky metal screen door. And then again, I've also learned that sometimes I personally use too many adjectives consecutively. Like, I'm trying to let myself only use one, maybe two, and try not to overuse my adjectives. 3 is a bit much, especially packed in together. So I can see that it would be a lot to say open a creaky metal screen door. You could consider you could leave it, but when I see the sound before the actual action, it's a thing for me. I would move it to after the action or during the action, but not preceding it. And I would consider if moving it puts too many adjectives like metal and screen together, I would consider letting one of them go, probably one of these two, if you do choose to do that. So, okay, we're gonna keep going. Okay, so Liddy walked up the crumbling steps. She's opened a creaky door. The wooden door behind it had a knocker, and Liddy relished the old-fashioned feeling of clanking it up and down before turning to her mom and waving at her. Okay. In this case, I would say waving to her. The wooden door behind it had a knocker, and Liddy relished the old-fashioned feeling of, I would say, of it clanking. Again, you have your sound before your action. So I'd tuck it in, so I'd just move it just a little bit. Feeling of it, I would say feel. Let's try this. The wooden door behind it had a knocker, and Liddy relished the old-fashioned feel. I guess I see why you're saying clanking. I want to say like tapping, or it's the same thing though, of moving it up and down. And I don't know. I like the clank too though. I get that, but I don't know. I'd fool with it longer. I don't want to fool with it too long because I hate to leave you guys with me trying to puzzle out the way I'd say something. I would fool with this sentence a lot for a couple of reasons. It's very nice. I like the feel. I like relishing the old-fashioned feel. I like that because I have a very clear visual of this person reaching up for a door knocker, and I get that same little thrill when I use one as well. So I can relate, and I think when we relate to our character and getting that same little pleasure out of something, I think that draws your reader in close to them, so that's very nice. So, but the sentence is a bit long. We have a lot of these, I want to call them extra words. So where if we rephrased it or worked it around a little bit, it'd be a little bit tighter. And I think I would fool with it just a little bit. But I do like it. Okay, we're gonna shift back to the other version here. Let's see. The wooden door behind it had a knocker, and Liddy relished the old-fashioned feel of clanking it up and down before turning to her mom and waving to her, waving to her. I always say waving to her. Oh my goodness, do we need to do a thing where we look up when to use at and when to use to? And is it interchangeable? Like, does it have a rule? It probably has a rule. I'm going to make a note. I'm curious. At and to. I wonder if it's the way we speak, and some people say, like speak one way and some the other. Anyway, I'm going to look into it. I made a note. She hoped she would drive away before Mrs. Reed came to the door and saw her. She didn't want them to start talking and delay her first day of work. Thankfully, Liddy's mom didn't seem in the mood to talk to Mrs. Reed, so her car disappeared down the street before the heavy wooden door was pulled open. Hi, Liddy. Come on in. Martha's in the living room eating breakfast. I have to go pick up Jordan, but I'll introduce you real quick before I go. Okay. I just had a thought that has nothing to do with this, with my equipment. And I don't know. I'm having a technical difficulty while we're working. That's not fun. Let's see what happens. Okay. All right, I hope that I did not just mess this up. I just realized something was not connected, so hopefully I did not just mess up this whole thing. Let me back up a second because I got distracted when I realized I did not have this connected. Let's see. She hoped that she would drive away before Mrs. Reed came to the door and saw her. She didn't want them to start talking and delay her first day of work. Thankfully, Liddy's mom didn't seem in the mood to talk to Mrs. Reed, so her car disappeared down the street before the heavy wooden door was pulled open. I'm going to point out a little bitty something. We've got wooden door in here, kind of in the same paragraph. You know what I would do if I was choosing? I'd keep this, and I'd probably omit this because you're also describing this door. So to describe each door could almost seem like too much, that closely together. So I think I would omit that one, and I would keep this one for that reason. I'm wondering, maybe, let's see. Maybe her mom, I'm wondering, her mom didn't feel like talking. Nothing has to be wrong to not feel like talking, but I'm a little curious. Anyway, okay. Hi, Liddy. Come on in. Martha's in the living room eating breakfast. I have to go pick up Jordan, but I'll introduce you real quick before I go. Mrs. Reed scooched to one side to let Liddy slide into the narrow entryway. Liddy took off her shoes and her jacket. I think we might be able to omit her and just say and jacket, shoes and jacket. That's just an opinion, though. She glanced around nervously, trying to figure out what kind of woman Martha would be. All she knew at this point was that Martha was an elderly lady who needed help with housework. Housework was about the only thing Liddy could do, so that's why she agreed to the job. She had been reassured that Martha was healthy enough she wouldn't need help with more unpleasant things like bathing or medical stuff. All she would have to do was clean and maybe cook a little. As she looked around at the house, following Mrs. Reed to the parlor, she saw antique-looking furniture covered in little lace doilies, figurines blanketed in sticky sort of dust that needs to be scrubbed off, and yellowish curtains that certainly were not that color 50 years ago. Oh, I love that sentence so much. Love that. I love these little details that you give are beautiful because we can relate to them, so I love them. I love it, especially this, that dust that is just yuck. Okay. And yellowed curtains that were not that way. Oh, I love it. Beautiful. From her observations, Liddy concluded that Martha was old. Okay, so I'm still getting vibes. If Liddy's saying this is about the only work that she can do, I'm wondering about her capacity. I'm still thinking possibly a disability here. Okay. Oh, hello there, dearie, Martha called out in a sugary sweet voice. So here we go. Here's like the kind of question we had the other day. Is dearie lowercase or is it capitalized here? Because Martha is calling out to her. It's probably lowercase. I'm kind of thinking it might be lowercase if it follows the same kind of rule as sir and ma'am, where basically it's something we just say, but it's not a name. I don't know. This one could be researched as well. I'm game if anyone does the research and provides me the answer, but I might look it up too, but I'm also looking at and too. So Liddy forced her eyes toward the old lady and tried to act cheerful. Hello, you must be Martha. Martha nodded. Please sit down. Liddy did sit, a little too abruptly, and the worn striped couch gave a little groan and puffed dust up in the air. There seemed to be dust all around this house. She could see why this old woman needed a housekeeper. For a second, Liddy was distracted by the dust. Behind where the old lady sat, it seemed to dance about in the way only the dust in old houses knows how to do. Okay, a couple thoughts about using dust in every other sentence. The way you used it here, it can be perfectly acceptable. And I get it, and I've got the vibe, and I got the feel. I don't have a hard, fast rule. I have a feel kind of way that I handle how I use things. Like when you do it deliberately and consistently, it can work. Let's try this again and see if it works. Liddy did sit a little too abruptly, and the worn striped couch gave a little groan and puffed dust up in the air. I love that sentence. There seemed to be dust all around this house. See, now that's good because like this, I'm still with you here in this use of it because she's now talking specifically about the dust. And that might be why this paragraph works okay. She could see why this old woman needed a housekeeper. For a second, Liddy was distracted by the dust. I kind of, I kind of want to make a tiny suggestion here, right on this line. When she's distracted by it, my mind immediately pulls up the image of motes, little dust motes floating around in the air. And I think you could even say that if you wanted. For a second, Liddy was distracted by the tiny motes floating around and floating in the air. I don't know what the room looks like, so I can't describe where they'd be floating. They typically float suspended in the light coming in through a window or something. But when I saw distracted, I got that visual because it can be distracting, and if you wanted to use that, that's just a thought anyway. Behind where the old lady sat, it seemed to dance about in only the way the dust in old houses knows how to do. So I kind of like the way you've used it, and I do like the old sentence, the sentence in the last sentence too. It kind of it also reiterates that visual of the little motes floating about. I don't know. I got a feel here. I kind of like it, and I might make a tiny change, and I might not. I might keep it. I like it. We're gonna keep going. Here, have a cookie, Martha said, still in the sugary sweet voice. She unclipped a large magnetic clip, one which Liddy supposed was meant for clipping things to the front of fridges, and unrolled the end of the cookie package, pulling out the plastic tray and shoving the sandwich cookies in Liddy's face. Oh my goodness. Okay. We've got cookie 3 times. Now here's the thing. If Liddy does have some kind of disability that affects her cognitively, the consistent reuse of words again and again and again would be acceptable if it fits the way that she thinks, in which, like, if it's how she thinks, she would use the words again and again and again. My author will know whether or not, and we're probably going to find out one way or the other, but I feel like there's something about Liddy. We don't know enough about her at this point, but if there's no reason author-wise for Liddy to reuse words again and again, then I would look at that. Here, have a cookie, Martha said, still in the sugary sweet voice, and unclipped a large magnetic clip, one which Liddy was supposed meant for, and we got clipping again. So we've got clipping 3 times. We've got cookie 3 times. I'm kind of hesitant to change anything or make any suggestions because I'm puzzling Liddy and wondering if this is the way that she thinks, if it's deliberate. The other thought that I'm having is we've seen things in parentheses a couple of times already, I think. Yep, one here, one there, and one up here. Now, this can be done. I don't have the rule on it. I kind of am thinking about looking that up too. And I'm going to make a note. Let's see. When to use parentheses in fiction. Because typically, I've always been told to do it sparingly. 3 times in the first chapter isn't something you usually see, so I'm kind of taking note of it. I'm not saying that it's wrong because, again, I don't know the rule. The way that I was taught, you do it very sparingly. And so generally, I try to avoid it as much as possible, if not altogether. I try not to do it more than like once in a book. I don't know. So I am noting the parentheses, and that's because I'm wondering what the rule is on it. And then I'm holding it up against what I've been taught. So that's going through. So like 3 different thoughts on that paragraph. But let's get back to the story portion. Martha's offered her a cookie. She's being very sweet. I'm thinking Martha's probably happy to have that usually elderly folk love to have company. She unclipped. All right. So she's got a plastic tray. So she didn't make these cookies, obviously. And she's shoved it in her face. Okay. So how does Liddy feel about having it shoved in her face? All right, here, let's go. Martha, Mrs. Reed looked at the old lady, almost amused. Is that what you're having for breakfast? Martha didn't respond. She was busy staring Liddy down. Liddy nervously took a cookie and nibbled at it. It was very stale. Oh, yuck. There was silence for a few seconds. Martha was still staring at Liddy, and Mrs. Reed was glancing back and forth between them both. Well, Mrs. Reed said at last, I need to go. I'm sure you two will get along fine. Just call me if you need anything. Liddy was not pleased Mrs. Reed was going already. Her introduction to Martha felt very incomplete. Martha didn't seem like a normal old lady. Liddy had heard about imposter syndrome in the workplace, but she always assumed it would be her that felt like the imposter. But at this moment, Martha seemed far more like an imposter than Liddy did. Liddy laughed at herself. She was being ridiculous. Martha was a very genuine old lady. Who was she to judge how old ladies should act? After all, she had already done some very cliche old lady things like calling her dearie and offering her cookies. Maybe she was too cliche. Is that a comma? I'm trying to see if there's something. No, it's a period. There was something on my screen. Okay. Liddy stood up as abruptly as she had sat down before, followed again by a cloud of dust. Well, Martha, should I get to work? Liddy leaned backwards a little so she could see into the kitchen. There were stacks of dishes by the sink. I could do the dishes to start with. No, Martha said in a sort of a dry, indifferent tone, much different from the cheery way of talking she had used when Mrs. Reed was in the room. We'll dust my bedroom first. Liddy's heart sank. Dusting was her least favorite part of cleaning, and she could only imagine what it would be like with an old lady looking over her shoulder. Every knick-knack probably had an hour-long story attached, and with how strange this particular old lady was, the story was probably unsettling. But this was a job. Jobs aren't supposed to be fun. They're supposed to be boring, Liddy told herself. She needed a job so she could make money and do taxes and find out what a 401k was and grow up and not be left behind by her peers. But Liddy had already decided she hated working. It only took her 10 minutes to decide that. She wondered how she was going to survive the rest of her life. As she lifted each trinket and sponged off the sticky dust, Liddy desperately wished she was a child again, discovering new kinds of clouds instead of inhaling them in dust form. I'm going to pause. I like that playback to the beginning when she thought about clouds. Let's see. Discovering new kinds of clouds instead of inhaling them. I almost want to say in puffs of dust or something like that. I don't know. In dust form. In the form of dust. Yeah, I think maybe kinds of clouds instead of inhaling them in the form of dust. Maybe? I don't know. It's reading pretty well. I'm letting repetitious words kind of go at this point because I'm still trying to figure out and puzzling out Liddy. We're going to keep going. Contrary to what Liddy had predicted, Martha was not talkative and had no old stories to share. She merely stared at the back of Liddy's head as she sat on the edge of her bed, swinging her legs in a way that suited a little girl much more than an old lady. Finally, she broke her silence. This time her tone wasn't sugary or dry. It, like her swinging legs, seemed girlish. What kind of stories do you like? Liddy was relieved that this was the sort of thing Martha wanted to talk about. She actually enjoyed reading, so she could keep up this kind of conversation. Well, I like fantasy books, the kind where there are other worlds and magic, like Narnia and the Wizard of Oz. Oh, and I especially like Alice in Wonderland. Good, Martha's voice was dry again. I was beginning to think I had picked the wrong person. Before Liddy could ask her what she meant, Martha stood up from the bed, groaning slightly, and grabbing Liddy's arm with too much pressure for a woman who looked so frail. I like mysteries and thrillers. I also like horror stories where no one makes it out alive and the endings make your stomach churn. Ew, creepy. Oh, I'm cringing a little bit. At this moment, Liddy's stomach was churning. Me too, Liddy, me too. Well done to my author. Unfortunately, Martha's disturbing behavior didn't stop there. Oh my gosh. I have something very interesting in my basement. Oh my gosh. Oh, I'm feeling for Liddy in a big way. Liddy froze in place. What do you have in your basement? Liddy's voice matched the anxiety in her eyes. Martha's eyes, on the other hand, were gleaming, her wrinkled face scrunching up in a smile that was just a little too wide. Don't worry, dear. Her voice was sugared again. I don't have a body down there. Oh, this is a smart little old lady. She's smart. Okay, she's definitely, she's going to be an interesting bird herself. All right, there's the word deer again, but we're going to look into that. Let's see. Yep, I'm going to write it down. All right, I got 3 things I'm looking up, you guys. All right. What do you have in your basement? Liddy repeated. This time she said it coldly and firmly, but it didn't affect Martha's shining eyes or dull the old woman's apparent excitement. I have a portal in my basement. It goes to a whole other world, just like in the stories you like. Do you want to see it? Yes, Liddy spoke without hesitation. I hesitated. I'm going to pause. I hesitated because if a little old lady tells me she's got a portal in the basement, that's almost as scary as a body, people. It's seriously. I don't know. I'd be, okay. But then again, all right. Once I get myself to stop squirming, okay. Yes, Liddy spoke without hesitation. She figured that if there was nothing there, she could call her mom to pick her up. Heck yeah, Mom, come get me. This little old lady's scary. There is no shame in quitting a job if your employer is insane. Okay, validation right there. On the other hand, if the little old lady was going to try to murder her, like in the horror stories, Liddy figured she could overpower her pretty easily and then call her mom to pick her up. I've got to stop because Liddy's just ready to call her mom and go home. She's like, I'm going to call my mom and go home. And I can't say I'm blaming her, but we've said the exact same thing twice. And I'm starting to think this is the way Liddy thinks. All right, here we go. Sorry, focusing. There is no shame in quitting a job where your boss tried to murder you. A little whisper in the back of Liddy's mind suggested a third scenario. She tried to dismiss it as silly. She would focus on the only 2 plausible scenarios, both of which ended with her going home and never coming back. And she liked that idea. I'm with you. I'm with you, girl. All right. The stairs to the basement were concrete with little metal edges. They caught slightly on Liddy's socks as she tiptoed down them. She watched Martha carefully as the old woman labored to bend her knees, hanging onto the rail so tightly that Liddy thought her white knuckle bones might pop out of her paper-thin skin. Liddy contemplated what she would do if the old lady started to fall. She knew she would be morally obligated to grab her and steady her, but for some reason the thought of putting her arms around the woman made Liddy's skin crawl. Was she afraid of old people? She always knew she was uncomfortable around the elderly and babies, but she didn't think it was to this extent. Yes, she would catch the old lady if she had to. I'm going to pause. I do like this use of parentheses right here. Okay, that's just a thought I want to interject. And I will also want to compliment the beautifully used adjectives here. White knuckle bones, pop out of her paper-thin skin. We have got the visual of an old lady down. This is great. Good job. Luckily, they both made it down the stairs with only minor fumbles. The basement smelled like most basements do. It had the undefinable scent of a place that wasn't quite made for living in. The floor was unfinished and felt gritty under Liddy's socks, and she hoped there weren't any loose nails or sharp debris hiding in the eerie darkness. Martha seemed unconcerned about stepping or tripping over anything as she plodded on deeper and deeper into the darkness. We've got darkness twice. I'm going to point out the repetitious words, but I'm also going to roll with them at this point because I'm still puzzling out Liddy. I can't tell if she's just really sheltered or if she's got some cognitive limitations. I'm unclear. And by giving the reader thoughts that pop through my head, the things that I'm puzzling out, my author can tell whether or not they're hitting the marks they want to, or if they need to tweak something so that they're not giving the wrong impression. So I'm just going to throw the thoughts out there for that reason. Can we turn on a light? Liddy asked, but there was no reply. She wondered if it was wise to follow the old lady, or if she should just skip to the end of the scenario and call her mom right here and now. But a little whisper of curiosity danced around in Liddy's head, much like the dust danced in the window upstairs. She followed the old lady. Yeah, see, she's used old lady. I'm also having the thought where she says, can't we turn on a light? And there's no reply. I don't know that if the little old lady went ahead of me and it's dark and I can't see her and she's not answering me and she's not turning on a light, I don't know that I'm going to continue to go on down deeper into the darkness. Okay. I just don't know that I'm going to do that. But all right, Liddy, let's see what you got. Okay. Liddy could barely see Martha in front of her, and she had lost sight of the walls of the basement completely. I am cringing. Every few steps she stumbled, and she was scared she was going to topple over right onto the frail woman ahead of her. Martha didn't stumble at all, and she didn't seem to have any trouble finding her way in the dark. Liddy supposed it was because she knew the basement so well, but after a couple of minutes, Liddy started to think Martha was just as lost as she was. Shouldn't they have reached the other side of the basement by now? Liddy turned around, expecting to see the pale blue light from the stairs somewhere close behind them. Or maybe to the right if Martha had gotten turned around as Liddy expected. But there was nothing. Liddy drew in a sharp breath. There must have been a door at the bottom of the stairs, and it must have swung shut. Wait, no. She did see the pale blue light. But it wasn't a large rectangle like she expected. It was a tiny patch of blue, no bigger than a postage stamp. Did the lady have a tunnel under her house? Was that her so-called portal? We're not to the portal yet, Martha interrupted as if she had read Liddy's thoughts. Why is your basement so big? Liddy blurted out, fighting the urge to sprint backward toward the blue light. It's not. Time and space just act differently around portals. But don't worry, we're almost there. Against her better judgment, Liddy carried on following the old lady deeper and deeper into the basement. She felt something soft and suspiciously spider-like squish under her foot. Ew. Okay, two thoughts at once. One, I wasn't trying to wait to get to a spot to say, and then the other just amplified with the spider squishing under her foot. And it feels like it. She can't see. But I'm just wondering, Martha had said there was a portal. Why did Liddy never ask? Did she say where the... I don't even remember. She might have even asked, and I don't remember now because I'm so caught up in this. But did she ask her a portal to what? Because she's following her through a portal, and maybe, she's just... Liddy's assuming the lady's just crazy, which she was. So maybe she didn't ask. I can't remember right now if she asked or not. But before I go walking into this portal, I think maybe I would have humored the old lady and been like, okay, so we're going to this portal. Okay, like, you show me your portal that I really don't want to see because you might kill me in your basement. But besides that fact, if there really was a portal, where does it go to? I'm just wondering, where does this portal go to? And is Liddy gonna... I bet Liddy's gonna wonder that here in a second. We're just gonna roll with it. Okay. I'm squirming a little bit. I'm squirming. Okay. She felt something soft and suspiciously spider-like squish under her foot. She tried not to think about it and wiped her sock off in the gritty dust. Oh, so much dust. Hoping there weren't any legs stuck in the knitting for her to find later. Ew, ew, ew. But by the way, excellent, excellent descriptors. Just really very visceral. Great job. On two other occasions, Liddy heard skittering, both on the ground and overhead. Oh my gosh. She also tried to push this out of her mind. She wasn't afraid of mice, but she didn't like the thought of them falling on her head in the middle of darkness and of a dark, endless basement. I'm thinking about her falling on her head. I don't like things scampering over my feet. Ugh. Okay, like, I don't have a fear of mice. Or, I always think of, like, when you're on the beach and you see crabs on the beach and they go scampering over your feet. Like, I like seeing the crabs. I just don't want them to touch me. I just want to see them. That's all. Anyway. However, the scariest thing in the basement by far was the old lady. I'm going to agree with you. Yeah, I agree with Liddy. I do. Okay. And that's what Liddy focused most of her attention on. She stared down Martha, watching for any sign of a weapon or tool of violence. But Martha seemed unconcerned with Liddy. She simply walked on at a steady pace, never looking back. Finally, after what seemed like hours, Martha stopped. Here we are, she said, pointing a long, flabby arm out in front of her. Liddy tore her eyes away from the old woman to look to where she was pointing. There was a little speck of blue light. Oh, like how you subtly got a little descriptor in there. Really nice. Very, very good. Right here. Love it. Okay. Aha, Liddy thought to herself. We have gone in circles. The portal is just the stairway we came from. But as Liddy stared at the little blue speck, it started getting bigger, and it danced slightly. Liddy blinked her eyes, thinking that maybe they were tired from all the darkness and were playing tricks on her. But another blue speck joined the first one, doing a dance that seemed so familiar. It was the dance of the dust she had seen earlier. Speck after speck of blue shining dust swirled into the darkness. There was now a cloud of sparkling blue light about the size of a bowling ball, and it continued to grow. You can see it. I'm having thoughts. My brain is having thoughts. Okay, I'm puzzling what's happening. I'm trying to release um, the word echoes. I'm trying to let them go. And at the same time, I'm liking the way one of the rules I was taught way back in high school was like, you don't start a sentence with and, but I've thrown that out the window. And I learned later on that you can throw that out the window as long as you do it sparingly and you do it right, and you did great. You can see it, can't you? Martha wasn't looking at the blue dust. She was watching Liddy's face. You know, usually only children can see the portal. That has been an issue for me. They can't help me at all. What? Liddy asked, only half paying attention. The ball of blue dust was now the size of a large pizza and still growing. I said, children can't help me. I don't hate children, but you can't deny that they're dumb. They also scare easily, and most importantly, they can't drive a car. The part of Liddy's brain that was still listening to the old lady laughed to itself because that description fit Liddy pretty well too. You're not a child, Martha continued. I'm going to pause. I'm having another thought. I want to compliment the way that you're tying back things to the beginning right here. And you've done that a couple times ahead of here that I've pointed out to you as well, which is really, really beautiful writing. So good job. You're not a child, Martha continued, unaware of Liddy's incapabilities. See, so there is some stuff there with Liddy. You're not a child, Martha continued, unaware of Liddy's incapabilities. But I knew you'd still be able to see it. That's why I wanted to hire you as my housekeeper. The blue dust cloud had grown to the size of a very fat camel. Oh my gosh, what a description. That is great. Its shape was a perfect circle, even though the individual dust pieces fell and floated erratically. How did you know I could see your portal? Liddy asked, her voice shallow and distant. My ladybugs have been scoping you out. They decided that you'd be able to see the portal and help me since you're not a child. This is so creepy at the same time. Okay. I don't have my license, Liddy. I gotta focus. I don't have my license. Liddy didn't know why she felt the need to admit this. Maybe she thought the old lady would lose interest in her if she knew how much like a child she actually was. Oh, never mind that, Martha waved her hand dismissively. You look like you should have your license. So as long as you don't get pulled over, you'll be fine. What? What? Wait. Oh, okay. Are there cars in the portal? Liddy intentionally kept herself from asking more important questions. She didn't think she could handle the answers. Well, yes, but you won't be driving those. I don't need you to go in the portal. I just need you to help me control it. And for that, you will need a car. Why? Martha gave a wicked, glinting smile. Because you are going to help me find and transport a suitable sacrifice. Oh, okay. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Okay. Wow. This is really good. This is really good. Okay. First of all, excellent way to end a chapter right there. Beautiful. You've got this creepy little old lady who, oh my goodness, your build is excellent. I like how your character, your old lady character, Martha, there transformed from something sweet and innocent to something definitely not. Not necessarily evil. We don't know that. We just know that she's definitely something sassy for sure. Miss, just absolutely. And then there's part of her that is creepy because, okay, first of all, she's wanting her to help her find a sacrifice, but a sacrifice could be anything. To be honest, we gotta chill out on a notch. It doesn't necessarily mean it could be a number of things. But at the same time, so many thoughts. At the same time, she's a little bit wicked for sure because she scouted Liddy and she use, I don't exactly know what the ladybugs were. I don't know if that's literally ladybugs and this little old lady's a witch, or something fey perhaps. I don't know. And that could also just be a nice sly way of saying, like, a little birdie told me, instead of saying a little birdie, she said ladybug. So it could be nothing also. But if you think about it, it's talked about it's confirmed that Liddy has incapabilities. We don't know what her limitations are, her cognitive ability. We don't know. I mean, she's definitely high functioning. If she has, she's definitely high functioning. We can tell that because she's intelligent. She's intelligent, okay, and that doesn't mean that people with disabilities aren't. But there's different levels of capability among disabilities, and we don't know what Liddy's limitations are or her cognitive ability is. So we can tell that she is high functioning. Okay, I'm just like, so let's say Martha has picked Liddy because she's innocent, okay? Depending on what it is she's wanting Liddy to do, which right away she's asking her to do something with a car, which makes Liddy uncomfortable, rightfully so. I guess we're going to find out the nature of Martha as we go, but there's definitely something wicked about using someone innocent to achieve your goals. So that's notable too. There's a lot of depth in this first chapter. I really like that. You've accomplished a lot in an opening. You did some beautiful writing here. This is really nice. You have a lot to be proud of, and I would definitely look at the second chapter. I'd be excited to turn the page. So congratulations. I'm really happy for you. This is beautiful. Thank you for trusting me with your words, and I will see you guys next time on When Mystery Red Reads.